We got a really interesting guest for you guys, Tara Palmieri. She was a White House correspondent for ABC News. She worked at Politico. She's got a new podcast, Broken, Seeking Justice. And they talk about the Jeffrey Epstein case there. So obviously super interesting. Tara, first of all, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So on the Epstein case, there's so many things to talk about. And I want to talk a little bit about how he avoided justice for so long and what you think might have happened to him. There's his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, Trump's reaction to it. But let me start at the personal level for Epstein and his associates. So how did they set this operation up in the first place before we get to how they got away with it?
It was basically a pyramid scheme, recruiting driven. You bring one girl, I'll give you $200. That person is incentivized to bring more girls. So he had, hundreds of women 3 times a day, but they're not women, they're children. They're tweens and teens, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old. I mean, he said the younger, the better. And so he incentivized these teenagers who most of them came from poor backgrounds to bring their friends to him, and they would make money by referring a friend. Then he had these adult women, in their late teens, early 20s, and then Ghislaine Maxwell, a actual, woman working out of her own volition to manage all these teens that were coming in and out of the house. She went out and looked. She sought them. She looked for them. She pretended to be a recruiter for Victoria's Secret. It was all about getting the girls in the house, and once they were in the house, they made it feel very normal. And the recruiter or Ghislaine or whoever brought them there would walk them up to Jeffrey Epstein's room, and that is where the assault would happen. But it wasn't just Jeffrey Epstein. So many of the victims tell me that his friends also abused them and assaulted them. And, this was a really huge, sprawling, complex web that not only included the girls that recruited, some of them victims as well, and the bookers who managed these people, Jeffrey Epstein's assistants, but, the chefs who fed the girls, the butlers who drove them around, the pilot who flew everyone around on Lolita Express, flying around teenage girls and adults. I mean, there are so many people that just kind of turned a blind eye. And that's a really big part of this season of Broken Seeking Justice, is talking to those people who are out there hiding, don't want any association with Jeffrey Epstein, yet saw so much. And I was shocked to find out how often, the FBI hadn't actually spoken to those people. I can give you one story. When I was traveling around with Virginia Roberts Giuffre, you probably know her. She's the girl in the picture, the 17-year-old in the picture with Prince Andrew. She said she was assaulted by Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Bill Richardson, a number of Jeffrey Epstein's friends. We actually ended up going to the house of his longtime butler, Juan Alessi, of 10 years, 1991 to I think 2001. He worked for him, and he'd never spoken to the press. Virginia and I, we buzz into his compound, this complex, this kind of golf course thing in Southern Florida near Palm Beach, and he lets us into the house, and he talks to us, and he says, "I'm so sorry, Virginia. I'm so sorry. I didn't do anything. I didn't know. But then talks about all the teenagers he drove around. It's very, very complicated. Kind of really delves into this idea of morality and when should people say enough is enough, call the police, do something about it. And while we're there, we find out from Juan that the FBI showed up before we arrived. And then he hadn't heard from them since Jeffrey Epstein died. Okay, this is almost like 7 or 8 months later. Actually, probably longer, maybe 10 months. And then while we're there, the FBI calls, and you can hear it in the podcast. They're talking to Juan. They're telling him, we want to talk to you. And then Virginia Giuffre Roberts, her phone, hours later, explodes. The battery explodes. It turns black, the screen. I had to get her a new phone, help her get a new phone, obviously. And it was just kind of this crazy experience where I'm like, are we being followed? Are they geo-pinging her phone? And that's why the battery exploded? Because apparently when they do that, it uses up battery life. And it just kind of reminded you, there are so many people out there who know so much about Jeffrey Epstein and the abuse and what happened. And they do not want the story to come out. And everyone else thinks it's over and it's been told, but it really hasn't.
So, Tara, you're saying amazing things. Let's focus for 1 second on what people knew. Because, okay, there's the butler and the pilot. And, their level of culpability is interesting. But then there's the other players that are much larger. So when you said Bill Richardson, I remembered that for decades, I had heard in Democratic circles that Bill Richardson could not be VP and could not run for president because he had skeletons in his closet. So everybody knew, and so I didn't know, and I always assumed that they weren't. That I'm like, oh, what do you know? I don't know that you know that, right? On the other hand, I used to think that about Larry Craig when people would say, "Oh, there's a Republican senator propositioning young men in men's bathrooms in Union Station." I'm like, "Oh, that's crazy. That's no way that's happening." And it turns out it was happening. It was Larry Craig.
Yeah, but this is different. This is different because it was just the flow, the number of women all with the same story. I mean, it was just neighbors complained in Palm Beach that there were girls coming to the house all the time in yellow cabs. Like, this was not something that was done in private. This was out in the open. The girls would walk around naked. That's what Virginia told us and others. It was not hidden. This was in plain sight.
No question. No question. So at this point, obviously, we know that part of the story. But how many people in power knew the people that were involved, whether it was Bill Richardson, whether it was Bill Clinton? Like, Bill Clinton went on the Lolita Express, right? Did he know it was the Lolita Express? And Donald Trump literally said, oh, Jeffrey and I share a common, something along these lines, I'm paraphrasing, common bond where we both like women, but he likes them really young. Like, so did Trump and Clinton and all these folks, did they all know that he was molesting young girls?
I don't know for a fact, but I have to think that based on what I've reported and what I've learned, that everything was really out in the open, and it would take a lot of self-denial to not see what you were seeing before your very eyes. So that's on them. I mean, the personal responsibility, what they saw, what they didn't, I don't actually know that for a fact. I do know that Virginia Roberts and others have said that they were abused and assaulted by his friends, and they named them. So, if you don't believe them, that was part of my mission also as a journalist, was to find corroborating evidence. That's the sad thing about this story. It's one woman against a very powerful man, women that you don't know. And it's their word versus there. It's her word versus theirs. Like, Virginia Roberts goes on TV. She talks about how Prince Andrew assaulted her. She doesn't put herself behind, I guess like a black screen or change her voice. She's out there saying, this is me and this is what happened to me. And then you have this prince from one of the most storied institutions in the world saying she's a liar. She's a liar. I've never met this woman. There's a picture out there. I've never met this woman. So for me as a journalist, I felt it was my duty to try to find the evidence to back this up. I mean, it really is a he said, she said.
So Tara, I guess one of the questions I have is this something that people, just powerful and rich people, knew each other, and word got around that if you like young girls, you go to Jeffrey Epstein, or was this more organized? Did it have a purpose? Or was it a ring of some sorts? And I don't know that we have enough information yet, but obviously you're doing podcasts about it, so you know a lot more than I do. So what information do we have on how organized it was, and if Epstein wanted those powerful people to be involved in this, or if it was, for lack of a better word on this horrific situation, recreational?
Well, here's what we do know. When the FBI raided Epstein's home, this is something I know from witnesses and victims, he had cameras everywhere in the house. Okay. So if things were happening, they were likely being recorded. He asked some of the victims, including Virginia Roberts, to give him details about the men that he trafficked her to. It seems to me that this kind of information would be valuable, right? Especially if you're trying to do business, blackmail, etc. Seems like a lot of it was driven by that. Maybe it was a sort of club, But to me, from what I've learned, it was that a lot of people really knew about it and just looked the other way and, said, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, when it was staring them right in the face. The Jeffrey Epstein story, is a sad one because he did serve time. 2008, he became a registered sex offender. He procured a child for prostitution. That's what they called it, as if a child could be a prostitute. And yet afterwards, when he returned to New York and Palm Beach and all these other places, he was embraced by society. It didn't matter because he was so rich. I mean, he had a party thrown for him by Peggy Siegel, and who's a Hollywood power broker, with Prince Andrew, attended by Katie Couric, George Stephanopoulos, Chelsea Handler, doctors. Bill Gates is taking meetings with him. He's giving money to Harvard. Deutsche Bank is using his money. MIT. He was able to waltz back into society as a registered sex offender. I mean, what does that tell you about our society? Jeffrey Epstein is a poison in it, but clearly we allow that to exist.
Tara, no, that's such a devastatingly good point. And it really, part of this sickness, obviously, is the child sex ring, these, and the molestation and rape, etc. But the other part of the sickness is the just blinded by greed. As long as he has money, they're like, oh, you're a registered sex offender who, at a bare minimum, molested 13, 14-year-old girls. Oh, but you've got money. Let's throw a party. God damn it. It's just revolting to think about. But we got to have you back on because we're out of time, but there's so many other things that I want to ask about the case. So everybody check out the podcast, Broken, Seeking Justice. Tara Palmieri, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.